Welcome to Whispers in the Dark, true horror stories, where real-life nightmares come to life. If you're drawn to the unexplained, the chilling, and the stories that linger in your mind long after midnight, you're in the right place. Tonight's tale is one of the most unsettling we've ever received. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for the darkness that lies ahead. Story 1: The Screaming Room. My name is Marcus, I'm 27 years old, and I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, a small town, but famous for all kinds of bizarre rumors. When I was in high school, my friends and I made the reckless decision to explore an abandoned building just outside of town, Jefferson Elementary School, which had been closed since 1974 after a mysterious death. The locals called it the Screaming Room, because on the second floor, there was a music classroom where a murder had taken place, and the teacher was found hanged in the middle of the room, with the final music still echoing. They said if you stayed in that room past midnight, you'd hear the screams, chilling enough to make your skin crawl, as if her spirit still hadn't found peace. One summer night when I was 16, I, along with 3 friends, Kevin, Eli, and Sarah, decided to break in through a back window to explore. The feeling of stepping into a place that had once been filled with children's laughter, but now only held darkness and mold, it was enough to give anyone goosebumps. The ground floor was fairly quiet, except for the smell of rot and the scrawled graffiti on the walls. But when we reached the second floor, things started to change. As we walked down the hallway toward the music room, Sarah suddenly froze. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. We strained our ears, and sure enough, we heard it: piano music, playing a short, repetitive tune, very faint, as if it were coming from the walls. But that was impossible. This place had been without power for decades. We followed the sound to the last room at the end of the hall. The door was nailed shut, but there was a small gap big enough to crawl through. Kevin was the first to slip inside. When it was my turn, I could immediately feel how different the air inside was, freezing cold, even though it was the middle of summer. The room was pitch black, and the only light came from our flashlights, catching the dust floating in the air. The piano stood in the center of the room, covered in cobwebs, but the keys were still moving, playing single notes on their own, even though no one was touching them. Eli raised his camera. At that exact moment, he screamed, "Someone just stood behind me." But when he turned around, no one was there. We checked the video, and in a few frames, we saw a blurry figure, with long hair, head tilted at an odd angle, standing right behind Eli. Suddenly, a scream shattered the room, but it wasn't any of us. It was loud, agonizing, like the final scream of someone torn between life and death. Sarah suddenly collapsed, her mouth mumbling incoherently. She pointed at the wall to the right, where now, slow-moving lines of text began to appear, as if someone were writing from inside. "Get out. She's awake." Without saying a word, we all rushed out of the room. But as we reached the door, Kevin turned around and said something I'll never forget. "She's sitting on the piano, watching us." I glanced back, and sure enough, a shadowy figure sat on the piano bench, long hair covering its face, and pale fingers gently tapping the keys, though no sound was coming from them anymore. We managed to escape, but Sarah lost her ability to speak for 3 weeks. Eli dropped out of school, moved out of state, and Kevin, he disappeared 2 months later under mysterious circumstances while traveling alone. Strangely, when the police found his backpack at a motel, inside, there was a handwritten note. "I hear the piano every night. She's still playing. As for me, I tried to forget it all. But every time I hear an instrumental piece playing from somewhere, sometimes in my headphones, sometimes from the empty apartment next door, I hear a single piano key being struck. And last night, I dreamed I was back in that room. This time, I was the one sitting at the piano." If this story stayed with you, please let me know in the comments. I really want to hear how it made you feel. Story 2, The Cold Spot, The Cold Streak in the Chapel. My name is Olivia, a student at the University of Pennsylvania, someone who used to be quite curious, the type of person who didn't believe in ghosts but never passed up a creepy rumor. During the fall of my 3rd year in college, my group of friends decided to camp near the edge of the Appalachian woods. Local legend had it that there was an abandoned chapel from the 1950s, St. Elijah's Chapel. They say that the priest who oversaw the chapel, Father Elijah Morin, disappeared one night while performing Mass. No one ever found him, and the strange thing was, the chapel door had been locked from the inside. After that incident, the church was permanently closed, and no one dared to go near it. Locals say anyone who enters after sunset hears prayers being recited, backwards. Of course, we treated it like a spooky story to scare the tourists. But that night, after a few beers and a dare, Drew, my boyfriend, and I accepted the challenge to go inside the chapel for 10 minutes. No flashlights. No phones. We grabbed an old flashlight and followed a grassy trail. When we reached the rusted gate leading into the chapel's courtyard, I had a strange feeling. The wind stopped abruptly, and the sounds of crickets and owls went completely silent. Drew just scoffed, "Must be the bat sleeping." The chapel door was ajar. Inside was pitch black, but what made my skin crawl wasn't the darkness, it was the freezing cold that pierced my spine, a cold that didn't come from the wind or the weather, but felt as though it was emanating from inside the room. As if the air was being drained. Drew shone the light around, thick dust, broken chairs, cracked ceiling. But on the pulpit, there was an open Bible, covered in dust, but strangely, the pages were completely clean, as if freshly opened. Drew stepped closer, whispering, Do you hear someone whispering? I held my breath. And then, I heard it too. The whisper was soft, like the wind, as if someone was praying, in a language that wasn't English. The voice was hoarse but persistent. We shone the flashlight toward the sound. The chapel was completely empty. No one there. Drew swallowed, his eyes suddenly filled with fear. I looked up. Hanging from the ceiling was a shadowy figure. Arms spread wide. Feet not touching the floor. The neck tilted at an odd angle, as if it were suspended. The head nearly brushed the ceiling. I screamed. Drew grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the door. But, the door slammed shut. It was locked tight. We hadn't even touched it. And then, the church bell rang out deafeningly. But no, we knew that the bell had been removed long ago. The sound continued to echo, as if coming from deep beneath the earth. With each chime, the ground trembled, dust fell from the ceiling like rain. Drew shouted, "The door won't open." He slammed against it until his fists bled. I turned back. The shadow was no longer on the ceiling. It was on the floor, its head hung low beside the altar. And then, it slowly lifted its head. Its face had no eyes, no mouth. Just a smooth patch of flesh, as if it had been erased. We stood frozen. The Bible on the pulpit began to turn its pages by itself, each page fluttering as if caught by the wind, making a sound like metal scraping. Each time a page turned, I heard the prayer in reverse, as if time was rewinding. Then Drew began to be dragged away. He stumbled back toward the altar, his feet scraping the floor. I tried to hold onto him, but he slipped from my grasp, as though something was pulling him. His shirt began to bear blackened handprints, as if burned. I screamed, "Stop!" And suddenly, the door flung open. As if something pushed it. I didn't look back. I pulled Drew and ran through the woods back to camp. That night, Drew didn't say a word. He just sat, panting, his eyes wide, staring into the darkness. I didn't dare to ask. 3 days later, Drew disappeared. No messages. His belongings still intact. The phone was unreachable. The police found no trace. But they asked me, "Do you know about the picture he posted on Facebook at midnight last night?" I opened my phone, confused. It was a series of blurry, grainy black and white photos. The first photo, Drew kneeling by the altar, arms raised as if begging for help. The second photo, a withered hand resting on his head, the fingers cracked like rotten wood. The last photo, a faceless figure of a priest, holding a smoldering Bible, standing right behind Drew. Behind them, was me, standing motionless, but I don't remember that moment. I never went back to that place. But many nights, I hear the sound of the church bell ringing in my sleep, and feel something standing behind me when I look into the mirror. I can't be the only one haunted by this story. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Story 3, Room 12, The Haunted Room. My name is Elijah, and I work in the field of dismantling electrical equipment from old buildings. I've stepped into countless derelict places, abandoned factories, old reformatories, even fire-damaged nursing homes, but none of them haunted me like Brookdale, a mental hospital that had been abandoned since 1987. In 2021, my team of 3 was hired to dismantle the old electrical system at Brookdale. They planned to renovate the building and turn it into an art center. Ironically enough, on the first day, when we received the keys, the building manager, an elderly man named Grayson, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Whatever you do, do not go into room 12. 3rd floor. At the end of the hallway." I asked why. He just shrugged, his eyes empty. "If you want to make it out of here in one piece, don't ask." I'd heard plenty of rumors like this before. Workers often pull stunts to scare each other. I just nodded and ignored it. But, as you know, humans. The more something is forbidden, the more curious you get. We started working from the ground floor and moved upward. The building was old but still showed signs of a place that once teemed with noise, desks, files, room doors, and even dried stains on the floor of the emergency room, like blood. On the 3rd day, during lunch break, my best co-worker, Pete, and I decided to check out room 12. Not because we were reckless, but because it wasn't on the electrical layout. I checked 3 times, the 3rd floor only had 11 rooms. We went up to the 3rd floor. At the end of the hallway, just as Grayson had said, there was a weathered door with rusted hinges. There was no room number, but on the peeling paint, the faint outline of 12 was visible. Pete pushed the door open. It wasn't locked. Inside was a small room with yellowing white walls. There was an iron bed chained to the floor, a sink with dark, smudged streaks, and a small mirror hanging on the wall. Pete stepped in first. I turned on the flashlight. But then, something felt off. Pete's shadow didn't reflect on the wall. I stopped. I called, "Pete, get out. Something's not right." He didn't answer. He just stood there, hypnotized, staring into the mirror. Then he whispered, his voice trembling, "It's in the mirror." I shined the light directly at the mirror. And what I saw was not me. A woman's face, hair disheveled, eyes wide and white, mouth open in a silent scream, no sound, but I could feel the scream piercing deep into my bones. I screamed, yanking Pete's arm. But when I turned my head back one last time, on the wall behind the sink, a dark, red-black liquid was dripping down, revealing the words, "I haven't gone out of here." Immediately, the iron bed began shaking violently, as if someone was thrashing, bound tight. The door slammed shut behind me, hard enough to shake the walls. Pete began whispering non-stop, "It's looking at me, it's looking at you, it's inside me." I pounded on the door, crazed, until my nails tore off. Finally, I had to use a crowbar to break the hinges. When we managed to run out into the hallway, Pete vomited onto the floor. It was black, thick blood. We never returned to the third floor. I reported to Grayson. He just sighed and pulled an old photo from his jacket pocket. It was a young woman, long hair, eyes wide as if there were no pupils. She was a patient in room 12, he said. She slit her throat with a piece of glass. Before she died, she said, "I will reflect every lonely soul." After that, Pete quit the job. I heard his wife say that every night, Pete would stand in front of the mirror, whispering to someone. Each time he was pulled away, he screamed, "I don't want to go back to that room. Don't make me go in." A year later, I heard news that Pete went missing in the bathroom, the door locked from the inside. The mirror was shattered. His body was never found. As for me, I still work in this field. But now, every time I step into an empty room, I check the mirror first. I've caught glimpses of my own reflection, moving half a second slower than I do in real life. Once, I turned away, then quickly turned back, and in the mirror, I saw someone still staring at me, even though I had turned my back. I always avoid room 12. But I know, no matter where I go, it's still watching me. In every mirror I look into. Don't just keep it inside, leave a comment, and tell me how this story made you feel. Story 4, The Basement Locker. My name is Andre. When I was 20, I rented a room in an old building near Chicago. Next door was an abandoned gym that used to belong to a high school that had closed after a major accident, where 3 students died when the roof of the school collapsed. The story of their deaths was still being whispered by the local kids. One of the stories they often told was about the row of lockers in the basement of the gym. They said that locker number 5 should never be opened because a student had once locked himself in there and suffocated after being missing for 3 days. At first, I thought it was just a silly rumor, but one night, things turned out to be very different from what I expected. That night, as I passed by the gym, I heard metallic clanging sounds coming from inside, as if someone was banging on a locker. I thought it was just some natural noise, but the next night, the sound came again, precisely at 1:05 a.m. At that moment, I couldn't resist my curiosity. I turned back, broke the lock on the gate, and entered the gym. The basement was dark and filled with old lockers, but when I shone my flashlight on locker number 5, I noticed a slight movement inside. The locker was vibrating strangely. A suffocating feeling spread through the air, as if something was wrong. The smell in the air was like that of a decaying body that had been left too long. I could feel something unnatural. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to listen more clearly. Suddenly, I heard a whisper from inside, "Go away." The voice was hoarse and weak, like a warning. My heart began to race, but part of me still couldn't resist. Despite the strange sensation rising inside me, I decided to use a crowbar to pry open the locker door. When the door popped open, I expected to find a reasonable explanation. But inside the locker, there was no one. It was an empty space with no signs of someone being locked in, just cold walls. But the moment I stood there, my flashlight flickered and went out. Darkness enveloped me, and the locker door suddenly slammed shut behind me. I stood frozen in the dark, feeling as if someone was standing right behind me. My heart was pounding in my chest. Before I could think, a cold hand touched my neck. It was so cold I felt like I could freeze instantly. I turned around, but saw no one. All that was there was darkness, the sound of my heavy breathing, and a heavy feeling of fear surrounding me. I tried to open the door but couldn't. It was locked tight. I don't know what I did to escape, but when I finally returned to my room, there was a large bruise on my neck, round, and shaped like 5 fingers, as if someone had gripped me tightly. I looked at the bruise in the mirror, and although I didn't want to admit it, I knew something was terribly wrong. 3 months later, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened that night. The curiosity inside me never faded. I went back to the gym again, seeking answers. When I arrived in the basement, I saw that locker number 5 had been welded shut, as if it had never been opened. The door, which had been pried open before, was now just a cold metal plate, inaccessible. The strange thing was, even though I knew the locker had been welded shut, I still felt an eerie presence there. It was as if someone was watching me from the other side of the cold wall. The bruise on my neck, though faded, hadn't completely disappeared. A chill ran down my spine every time I thought about it. Since that day, I couldn't look at any locker without thinking of locker number 5 in the basement. I couldn't explain the strange event, but I knew that something was still in that gym, something that hadn't been resolved, something that couldn't be forgotten. That's the one thing I can't shake off. Every time I pass by dark rooms, I can't stop thinking about something lurking behind the doors. And I still wonder, is locker number 5 really sealed shut forever, or is it just a way to hide some truth I'll never know? I once heard the saying, never open a door unless you're sure you can handle what's inside. And now I understand that sometimes, even when doors are firmly closed, they will reopen when you least expect it. This one gave me chills. What about you? Let's talk in the comments. Story 5, The Red Stairs. My name is Melissa, and I used to be a teacher's assistant at a small private school in Oregon. The school closed in the late 90s due to lack of funding and an undisclosed incident. At that time, I was only 8 years old, but what happened there has haunted me for many years. 3 years ago, I returned with a group of old school friends to film a documentary titled Forgotten Places. We chose our old school, a place that was once part of our childhood. But there was one area that everyone avoided, the red stairs leading to the basement. It was always locked, and we were never allowed to go down there when we were students. The teachers always warned us about that place, and we only heard rumors of strange occurrences from previous students. When we returned, there was an odd pull from the school. During filming, our group discovered that the door to the red stairs was no longer locked. Despite the sunny day, no light seemed to reach the bottom, as if something was absorbing all the light. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to it. As if something was calling my name, as if a part of my memory was waking up. I couldn't explain the strange feeling. It reminded me of those mornings when I was young, standing by the classroom door and watching the light shine down the red stairs. Something whispered in my mind, telling me to go down. As soon as I stepped onto the first step, the camera light immediately flickered, and a static crackling sound echoed from somewhere, like an old radio losing its signal. I couldn't explain the uneasy feeling that enveloped me, as if something was watching, waiting for me to step further. At the bottom of the stairs was a narrow corridor with walls covered in scribbled crayon drawings of faceless children. I thought it was just the prank of some old students, until one of my friends, Tom, pointed at a drawing near the end of the hall. It depicted a little girl in a dress like mine, with a scribbled caption, "She's back." Tom, still confused, looked at the drawing, but as I stared at it, a cold chill spread over me. The girl in the picture had my face, but she wasn't me. The caption reminded me of the rumors about a student who had mysteriously disappeared at the school. They said her spirit could never leave, that her soul had returned to seek those who had once lived in the school. Just as I finished reading the caption, Tom was suddenly shoved forward. No one touched him. He gasped in pain, and blood started oozing from his ears, as though he'd been hit with an overwhelming sonic shock. The static noise returned, this time sounding like a low, distorted voice, murmuring, "Don't stay." We panicked and tried to get Tom out of there, but the way back was blocked by a metal door that appeared out of nowhere, locking us in. The stairs had disappeared. In the darkness, the sound of a child crying echoed, slowly transforming into maniacal laughter. Something started to move down the hallway, like the sound of an old wooden cart rolling on the tile floor. These sounds couldn't possibly be real, but they were so clear we could feel the coldness radiating from them. When I looked back, a small school trolley appeared at the end of the hallway. Inside was a headless child, wearing the old school uniform. My eyes couldn't believe what was happening. The child had no head, but it was still moving, the cart rolling along the walls, as if searching for a place to stop. We don't clearly remember how we got out, We just know that when we woke up, we were in the school's backyard, in the dark. The camera was destroyed, the memory card had lost its data. Tom was taken to the hospital for severe hearing damage, but he could never remember what happened in the basement. A week later, I received an anonymous package, containing a photo from the class I was in when I was in second grade, but there was something strange. In the photo, next to me was a classmate I don't remember, their face smudged with black ink, but their hand was holding mine. That face, it was the face of the child in the drawing in the hallway. On the back of the photo, there was only one sentence written in red ink. "You promised you'd come back to play." I couldn't understand what was happening. There was something in that school, a force we couldn't explain. Was the spirit of the child in the drawing real? Or was this just a recurring nightmare from my childhood memories? But the photo and that message made it impossible to ignore. And then, I remembered an old story. A student before me had disappeared in that basement. They said she went down there one rainy night, and no one ever saw her again. No one dared to speak about what had happened, but I always felt she never truly left. Maybe she was waiting for me, waiting for some connection from the children who had once been there. As for me, I can't escape that school. Those memories, those unexplainable events, continue to haunt me. Every night, I see that headless school trolley rolling back and forth in my mind. And the maniacal laughter still echoes, like an invitation for me to return. But this time, will I dare to face it? Do you think it was real? Or just a memory twisted by fear? Share your thoughts below. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Which story haunted you the most tonight? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you've ever experienced something unexplainable, something real and terrifying, send your true story to Gmail, tradeep2511@gmail.com. Your nightmare might just become our next video. Don't forget to subscribe to Whispers in the Dark, true horror stories. We share real horror every night, just before you sleep.